Let's break out those Dollar Tree fabrics that you've been buying and you don't know what to do with. You can make some beautiful things with these fabrics, and they're actually not terrible quality. So get your interfacing, get your fabric, and let's make a beautiful little bag. Okay, so the biggest downfall I find to Dollar Tree fabric, which are not very many downfalls at all, is the way they come rolled up in these little rolls. Leaves lots of creases because they're folded as if they should have been like a fat quarter, but then they're rolled up and there's quite a few creases. So ironing is a must. And so I always take the time to press all of these pieces before I put interfacing or cut them out. You may choose to wash these. You could wash these and dry them and then press. But for the sake of our little pouch, I don't think it's necessary to do that. So I always start on the back side and press my creases out, and then flip it over to the right side. So do this with all the fabrics you plan to cut for your bag, and we'll come back and we'll interface. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this interfacing and open it up. Now, you should be able to get most of this fabric covered just fine. I mean, we don't need the entire fat quarter for the exterior, but this is going to be my top main piece of my Clematis pouch. And so I'm just eyeballing here. I'm going to lay my interfacing piece down. Sorry. And I'm probably not going to cover the entire piece, but I am going to cover enough that I can get 2 of these main outer pieces done. Now this is not woven interfacing, it is non-woven interfacing. If you have woven interfacing already in your stash, fantastic. But just for the purposes of this video, where I would probably normally use woven interfacing, I'm going to use Dollar Tree just to show that you can still get a really beautiful, classy looking product with supplies from Dollar Tree. Okay, so just make sure that's really well adhered. And I'm going to take a peek. I need to interface a little bit more at the top. Or press a little more at the top, I should say. All right, so I have a good strip about this long interfaced. Looks like it's stuck to my fabric just perfectly. And what I will do is take a pair of scissors and I'm just going to trim away the interfacing that I did not press down with my iron all the way. And then I'm going to go back and make sure that those edges are pressed down. So do this with all your pieces and then we will cut out our pattern. Okay, so I'm going to begin tracing my pattern pieces onto the back side of the fabric, and I'm starting with my blue denim base. And I just find this makes my life a lot easier when cutting out pattern pieces, and I feel like I can get really, really accurate if I draw the line and then cut with my scissors for curved pieces like this. You could, if you have a cutting machine, and you know I love my cutting machine, set this up in Cricut, on your Cricut, and you would be able to cut this out very accurately that way as well. And of course, drawing the lines accurately is imperative. So I'll get both these pieces traced out. And as you can see, I'm probably only using a little over half of this piece, and we can use the leftovers for other projects. I may actually use this also for the zipper tabs. If you are interested in this pattern, it is a free pattern on the Blue Kella website. And for those who have watched my channel for a while know that I love Celine's patterns and love making them. I feel like they're just super well written. They're beautiful, they're simple, and to the day I die, I'm going to continue making her patterns. So I have that traced. I'm going to cut that out off camera. So now I have my main fabric, and we need 2 pieces of this main fabric. Find my pen, and I'm just making sure that I am drawing this where I want the pattern to show up, because with this interfacing you can actually see what it's going to look like. And this top piece is going to be sewn to that bottom accent piece. So almost all of the design on this top piece is going to show up. So do keep in mind, if you have directional fabric, it is super important that you are cutting or drawing out this piece in the correct direction. So with the amount that I've interfaced here of this fat quarter, I could probably get another whole bag, and at the very least be able to use this piece as the bottom contrast with another fabric. So there's our main, and I will take this off camera, but I'm going to do the same thing with my lining. I need 2 slip pocket pieces and 2 inner lining pieces, and that is it. All right, so I have gone ahead and cut out every piece that you need for this project. I'll go over the pieces now. So I have a piece here for the wrist strap. I have the D-ring tab piece. I have a zipper. I've cut it much longer than you need. You need about an 8-inch zipper and zipper pull, zipper tabs, the 2 bottom pieces, accent pieces, our 2 main top pieces, 2 slip pocket pieces, and our 2 main lining pieces. That is everything you need. I did not pull out the D-ring yet, but I am going to pull out a 1-inch D-ring as well, and a swivel clasp to go on the wrist strap. And I mean, the wrist strap is completely optional. If you decide that you don't want a wrist strap, you don't have to add it. So let's get started. Okay, so I've gone ahead and done the pressing for our wrist strap, our zipper tab ends, and our D-ring strap. So basically what you're going to do for the wrist strap is fold it in half, give it a press, then you're going to take each side folded in to meet that center crease mark, and then we are going to fold it so that it's 1 inch wide, and then give that a good press as well. Do not sew this yet, because when we make our strap, we're going to add the hardware first before we attach everything together. Same thing goes for our D-ring strap. Fold it in half and give it a press, then fold each end in and fold that again, and there's your D-ring strap. And zipper ends. You're going to fold the 2 short ends into the center and fold it over again. So your zipper ends should be these teeny guys. D-ring, wrist strap. All right, so now we're going to go to the sewing machine and get going. Okay, so the very first thing I'm going to do is get my wrist strap and my D-ring straps completed, just to get that out of the way because we won't have to worry about it later on. And then I'm going to prepare our zip. Okay, so first let's do the D-ring strap. That's easy enough. So we folded our D-ring strap, and now what we're going to do is top stitch along both long edges. And once we've top stitched, we're going to place our D-ring and just fold it over and save that for later. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And for my top stitch, I'm using about a 3.5 stitch length. And you want this top stitch to be about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so trim all your threads. Make sure that looks neat and tidy. And then I'm going to place my D-ring, and we're finished with our D-ring tab. I'm just going to put a little clip in that and hold it in place until we're ready for it for the next step. Now, for your wrist strap, what we need to do is we need to unfold. First we're going to place our swivel clasp on this wrist strap. Then we're going to unfold the two shorter ends, so these two ends here, and you're going to clip these two shorter ends right sides together. Clip those in place. Grab a few clips here, and we're going to sew along this short edge here at 1/4 inch. Just make sure they're lined up nice and straight. Clip those together and take that to your machine and sew it 1/4 inch. Once we're finished sewing with that, we're going to finger press open that seam so it lays flat. And you can back stitch here. Snip your threads. All right, so what you should have now is this loop, and it's turned inside out. What I'm going to do is press open this seam. You could take this to your iron as well. You just want it to lay nice and flat. This, and then we're going to refold our folds that we made before. Make sure that seam is laying flat in there. What you should have now is your wristlet strap and with your D-ring on it, and you should have a closed loop. What we're going to do while moving this around to accommodate your sewing is we're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch on each side of the wrist strap. Okay, so tidy up all those threads. You can burn them if you want to. Now, what I like to do is find where that joining seam was, and you can feel it. And I'm going to pull my D-ring up here. And now what we're going to, not my D-ring, my swivel clasp. And now what I'm going to do is make sure this is laying nice and flat. And we're going to sew a box just to hold that swivel clasp in place. Okay. All kinds of threads. So I'm going to snip all my threads, make sure it looks neat and tidy. And if you want, you can go and give your little wrist strap a press. So what we have here now is our wrist strap, and I've sewn a little box around just to hold that swivel clasp in place. Okay, so you can set that aside. And now we are going to work on our zipper and zipper tabs. So if you haven't already done so, go ahead and place your zipper pull onto your zipper and pull out your zipper tabs. All right, so I have my zipper cut to size and I have my zipper tabs. What we're going to do is unfold the zipper tab on one end, and you're going to butt it up right to the edge of your zipper, and you can clip that in place if you want to hold on to that. Your other zipper tab, same thing, just do that on the other end. So again, make sure that your zipper pull is installed on your zipper tape if you are not using a fixed zipper, because if you sew your zipper tabs on without the zipper pull, you will be very sad. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew along this zipper tab at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on both ends. Okay, so for some reason, these zipper tabs just did not want to go on very straight, but I did the best I could, got them on as straight as I could. And now what you want to do is trim down the sides so that they are flush with your zipper tape. You might have a little bit hanging over the end, like I did. All right, so we have our zipper. Next thing we want to do is make sure you have your centers marked on all of your pieces. So I've cut a little notch in the top and bottom of each piece and centered each piece. You can use a marking pen or you can cut little notches like I did. So the first thing we're going to do is take our main piece and one of our contrast bottom pieces. And you want to make sure if you've marked your top, so this is my top, I had it upside down, I'm glad I checked. Lay that right side up, and then you're going to take your contrast bottom piece and you're going to match up the centers. So you're going to hold it like it would be right side up, flip it over, and match up your center notches or marks. Now it's going to feel like it doesn't fit properly, but bear with me. Okay, so I've marked or clipped that together. And then what I'm going to do is just follow this edge. It's going to feel counterintuitive to do it like this, but this is how we're going to get our nice curve. Use lots of clips. So you will have a little bit of buckling here as you move along. Just make sure that your edges are laying together nice and flat. They should meet up perfectly. Okay, so I'm going to continue down the other side. Usually start at the center and work my way to the edge. Line up pretty perfectly. And then what we're going to do is take this to the machine and we are going to sew this at 3/8 of an inch all the way across. And there is a curve here, so just make sure that you're keeping your seam allowance correct. Okay, so what you should have is your top and your bottom sewn together. If you have pinking shears, go ahead and cut this curve with pinking shears, letting this be about 1/8 of an inch. If you don't have pinking shears, you can snip into the curve. Make sure you're super careful not to cut through your stitches. And I should show you, if you've sewn this curve correctly, you should have little dog ears. You can trim those off as well. And what this will do is give you a really nice curve when you press this out. Okay, so what we want to do is open this up. And we're going to press the seam allowance down towards the bottom of your pouch. So if you want to take this to your iron, if you're using cotton like I am, you can go and press this. I think I will, because it just makes for a nicer edge. So you're going to press this, and then we are going to top stitch along that bottom edge at 1/8 of an inch. And then you're going to repeat exactly the same thing for your other two outer main pieces. So I will come back to you after I have sewed these together and pressed them, and then we will top stitch together. All right, so I have sewed both edges, gone over with pinking shears, and pressed both edges of my main front. And what I'm going to do is going to top stitch along this edge on the bottom accent piece at 1/8 of an inch, trying to keep that as nice and straight as I can possibly keep it. All right, so definitely not my best top stitching, but it's not terrible. Okay, so we're going to snip our threads. And we have our two top pieces assembled and top stitched. Now what we need are these two pieces. We need our zipper, and we need our two, oh actually, first we're going to create the pocket and the lining, add that to one of our lining pieces before we move on with the front. So you have two pieces that should look like this. We are going to place them both right sides together. And what we're going to do is we are going to start at the top. You want to leave about a 2 inch, 2.5 inch space at the top for turning. So we're going to start at the top here. We're going to sew all the way around at 1/4 inch. So start about, I'd say 2 inches at least from the edge. Make sure you backstitch here because this is where you're going to turn the pocket. Okay. Make sure you keep your pieces lined up nicely. And then sew all the way around. And when you get back to the other top corner edge, you're also going to sew in about 2 inches. Okay, so I'm at that second top corner and I'm going to sew in, leaving about 2.5 to 3 inch gap at the top here for turning. Okay. I'm going to trim these threads, and what I will do is take my pinking shears and I am going to go around the curves with my pinking shears and trim that seam allowance down everywhere except for that top area where you left a space, because you don't want to trim that down. It'll make it difficult to turn it back and press it and sew it up later. I'm just going to take the pinking shears to these corners, leaving my seam allowance at about 1/8 of an inch. Looks like I sewed this pocket a little less than 1/4 inch. 1/4 inch wasn't great here. Okay, so there's my pocket, and I'm going to turn this. First, I'm going to clean up my mess. Then I'm going to turn that pocket right side out and give it a press. Make sure you poke your corners out really nicely. Also make sure you have your curve all pressed out nicely. So I like to take the seam and kind of just roll it between my fingers. Let that seam rest flat. Okay, so I'm going to take this to my iron. What I'm going to do also is where we have our opening, I'm going to push in the edges till it lays the way I want it to. And take this to my iron and press it. And then we're going to come back and top stitch along that top edge of the pocket. Okay, so now what we're going to do is top stitch along the top of this pocket lining. Now what we're going to do is top stitch along this pocket just to close it up. Okay, snip my threads. And we need to install this pocket on one of our lining pieces. So it doesn't matter which one. They're probably both the same. So you're going to lay a lining piece up, right side up. And we're going to take our pocket, decide which side you want to have facing. And we're going to measure about 1 inch. I'm just going to use my table here. 1 inch from the edge. And make sure it's centered. as you can. Actually, what I'm going to do is fold this in half to kind of just crease it and see the center. And I'm going to take my center mark and line that up and bring it about an inch up from the bottom edge. Make sure it's sitting nice and straight. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to sew this pocket on. I'm going to start at the top right corner, about an inch in, sew across the top all the way around the pocket, and at this other corner, sew another inch in and backstitch in place. When I sew at the top of the pocket, I'm just going to go right over my top stitching. And we're going to sew this on at 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to use my hand wheel to get in the right spot. Turn, and now I'm going to sew down the rest of the pocket. Make sure you hold this nice and flat so it doesn't shift around on you. Okay, I'm back up at the top, and now I'm going to sew in about an inch. Snip your threads. Okay, we're almost finished. Okay, so we have our pocket installed. The reason we sew at the top corners is just so that that pocket doesn't sag on the inside of your bag. So I'm going to start with this lining piece, and I'm going to fold my zipper in half and find the center mark on my zipper. Give it a little pinch. I don't like to snip into my zipper tape, but you could if you're comfortable doing that. Then I'm going to find my center mark here, and we are going to pin the zipper in place on the top of, with your lining right side up, and you want your zipper pull, I guess at this point doesn't really matter what direction your zipper pull is going. You can decide what the front and back of your pouch is going to be later, but I'm just going to be consistent and have my zipper pull going to the left here. You want to clip this in place, lining up that zipper along the top edge of your lining, and then we are going to base this with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, I'm all pinned in place, so you should have a little over 1/2 inch space on either end of your pouch. I'm just going to straighten this out a little bit because it looks like it is not quite center. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to base this in place with 1/8 of an inch, and then we are going to add our main piece and sew the zipper in. Just make sure that you're following the curve along your top edge. Snip. Okay. So you should have your zipper basted on, and now you're going to take one of your main outer pieces and you're going to lay that right side down. Make sure your top is facing and match up your centers and clip that in place. And we are going to sew this at 1/4 inch. Okay. I need to move my zipper pull out of the way. Okay. Snip my threads. Okay, so what you should have now is your zipper attached to both the lining and your main fabric on one side. And we're going to repeat the exact same thing on the other lining and main piece. All right. All right, so what we should have now are your lining and your main pieces attached to the zipper. So what I suggest is when you're top stitching, undo your zipper. It's just going to make everything lay a bit nicer. And you will notice that your lining pieces are a little bit smaller than your main outer pieces. That's okay. You want them to fit snugly inside your pouch. So what I'm going to do is take this over to my iron and I'm going to press this edge just so it stays nice and crisp. And I will come back and we will top stitch. Edge, and like I said, it can be easier to do that if you unzip your zipper. So you just want to make sure that the lining is sitting in generally the right place. Everything is nice and flat. And we want to top stitch along the zippered edge at 1/8 of an inch. What I'm doing here is I'm pulling my lining and my outer down so that they're laying nice and flat. Okay, there's one side. Okay, and now we'll top stitch the other side. So make sure that your lining pieces are not folded together. You don't want to sew those pieces down to one another. So again, I'm just tugging that lining and outer piece away from my zipper tape. Perfect. Okay. The last thing we need to do before we close this up is to sew our darts. Now, if you've never done darts before, they might look intimidating. They're quite easy to do. So all we need to do is where your cuts are, You just need to match up those straight edges, clip them in place, and we're going to sew that at 1/4 inch. So there should be 8 of these darts that you're going to need to sew. What this is going to do is kind of like a boxed corner, but it's not a boxed corner. These are darts, so that it's going to give your bag a little bit of room in the bottom. Okay, so we're going to sew 8 of these darts at 1/4 inch, and then we're going to trim that down to 1/8 of an inch when we're finished. Last dart. I think this is probably the most time-consuming part of this whole pattern, but not difficult, just finicky. Okay. All right, so I'm going to take a sharp pair of scissors, and I'm just going to trim those darts down to 1/8 of an inch. And 8. All right. Clean up my mess. We are almost finished. So what we need to do now, make sure that your zipper is open at least halfway. And we need to match up. I like to start with the darts. And when I sew the darts, I have them nested. So I'm going to have one to the left, one to the right. And I'm going to clip there first on each corner and match up your centers as well. Okay, so I have my 2 outer clipped together, and now I am going to clip together my linings. Often the darts will tell you which direction they want to go. They will just naturally want to sit in a particular direction depending on how you sewed them. All right, and so I'm going to clip the rest of the bag. We're going to sew around this entire entire bag, except we are going to leave about a 3-inch opening in your lining at the bottom of the bag, and we will close that up at the end. You do want your zipper tabs to be facing in towards your lining to have that sit nice and flat. So you want to make sure you match up. If you're using a contrast, make sure that those seams match up. It's a good benchmark. I'll do that on the other side. Make sure that they are lined up. It should all sit nicely in place if you kept your seam allowances and cut correctly. Throw a couple more clips in here at the bottom. And so you want to make sure your center seams are lined up. You should have at least a 1/2 inch space before hitting the zipper tab, so it should be easy for you to sew this side edge. Okay, line everything up. Okay, I'm going to place a red clip in the center of my lining just to remind me not to sew. Actually, I'll even draw myself a little opening. So a reminder for myself to stop sewing. And the last side we will line up. Okay. Oh, and we almost forgot. I'm glad I stopped myself here. We want our D-ring to be clipped to the main outer piece. So I'm going to take a peek and see which direction my zipper is going. All right. So my zipper is closing to this side, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay that D-ring connector with about a ½ inch hanging outside into the inside of the bag. And I'm going to clip that in place. If you're not doing the wrist strap or you don't want a D-ring, then that would not have been a big deal. But for me, if I forgot that, there would be no wrist strap for me on this bag. Okay, ready to sew. So we are going to sew all the way around the bag. I'm going to start at the lining where the opening is, come all the way around the bag, and stop at my other mark on the lining. And for this, 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. Just take your time on the curves. Make sure you backstitch well where that you're leaving that opening so that we don't tear through any stitches. And you want a nice curve here, so take your time on your curves. Making sure my hardware before I sew over that D-ring connector, making sure the hardware is not in the way. I do not want to sew over that. And when you get to that, you may need to go over your connector a couple of times. My machine does not want to go. There we go. I'm going to backstitch a few times. I don't want that coming out. Okay, continue on. I'm coming back around to that last corner. So I'm going to backstitch, and our bag should be closed. So take a look at your stitching. It looks like I might have gone off a little bit, my seam allowance in a couple of places. Not too bad, actually. It's not as bad as I thought. All right, so we have almost finished our bag. What we're going to do is open up where we left that opening and pull the bag through. We're going to turn the bag. So reach in there and grab your outer. While I do this, I'm going to talk a little bit about Blue Calla. So I'm Canadian and I'm in Ontario, and Celine from Blue Calla is probably the closest bag maker that has a shop to me. I do also shop at places like Emmeline, Zipper Valley. There's a bunch of different places, but I really like Celine's patterns a lot. And she has graciously allowed me to sew them for my YouTube channel. And I really like to order from her as well. She has really high quality hardware and supplies, beautiful fabric selection. So I just I'm a big fan. So go give Celine some love over at Blue Cala. She has some gorgeous, gorgeous bag patterns. The wallet I carry every day is one of hers. The purse I carry every day is one of her patterns. And just someone that I think really deserves your business. Anyways, okay, so let's see what we've got. We want to make sure we push out where those darts are. Make sure everything is looking nice and smooth. That's adorable. Look at that. Push up your little zipper tabs. Okay, all we have left to do now is to go in there and pull out that lining. So give it a little tug so that it folds in, and we are going to sew that lining closed with a 1/8 inch seam allowance, or even smaller than that if you can manage. You barely want that noticeable. I'm going to do that. Make sure all my threads are tucked in nicely and that this is laying flat. Okay. Close this up. Snip this little thread. Make sure it's lined up nicely. All right, back stitch and close up the bottom of your lining. Funky little loop. Cut that. Okay. So let's turn this out and see what we've got. You can see me now. I am covered in threads. Just covered. Okay, our darts look really nice. Very nice. Some stray threads here. Make sure we snip everything. Now, if you want, you can give this bag another little press. But let's just take a peek. Clip my little wrist strap on. There you have it. How cute is that? And other than the zipper, zipper pull, and the D-ring and swivel clasp, every single thing in this bag I purchased for under $5 at Dollar Tree. So it is possible to make super cute projects for not a whole lot of money, and I'm just really impressed. This looks really cute. Anyways, thank you very, very much for watching this video. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you. I would love for you to hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please do. It always helps me keep on going and gives me a little motivation to keep on doing videos like this. And I really appreciate every single one of you who takes time to watch one of my videos. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a fantastic, fantastic week. Bye, friends.